I'm here to challenge you to ask yourself how your existence impacts the world. How do your everyday little actions affect your body, your home, and your neighbors? Think past your work or your hobbies. Instead, try to focus on all of the small little choices in between, like what kind of foods do you eat? What kinds of clothes do you wear? Or do you toss your trash in the recycling or the waste bin? What do these little actions do to the world? This is meant to be a challenge. I know no one likes to wonder if they're doing something wrong or they're not doing enough, but I'm not here to make you feel comfortable and tell you to do exactly what you're doing, because we don't really have an opportunity to grow and have significant change come from that. My father always told me, Monica, you'll never learn by doing what's easy. If you seek the ideas that make you uncomfortable, you can only grow. So I hope I can challenge you to do the same. The ultimate purpose of this question is to inspire you to live a more compassionate life full of conscientious choices that reduce as much harm to the world as possible. More specifically, I'll focus on how a plant-based diet is the perfect place to start. Your body. What does your trip to the grocery store look like, and how often do you wonder what the foods that you're eating do to your body? It turns out that many diseases are influenced by diet. The number one killer in America is heart disease. It's caused by high cholesterol levels found in processed foods and animal-derived foods. These can cause fatty deposits that clog your arteries, known as atherosclerosis. A study published in the Journal of the American Medicine Association showed that atherosclerosis begins in early childhood, and later studies found traces of it in children as young as 10 years old. But symptoms might not show until decades later when it's too late. Luckily, this disease has shown to be reversible. Studies have shown that cutting out animal-derived and processed foods from your diet helps to reverse atherosclerosis. Lung diseases like asthma and brain diseases like Alzheimer's have also claimed many American lives. But studies have shown that a diet rich in whole foods and plant-based foods reduce the risk of developing these diseases altogether. There has been a staggering amount of research and literature published with claims that animal protein promotes the growth of cancer cells of all types. In line with these findings, researchers have also explored the possibility of turning cancer cell growth on and off by raising and lowering doses of casein, which is a protein only found in animal products. High consumption of dairy products, such as milk, have also been linked to osteoporosis bone disease. This happens because animal protein creates an acid-like condition called metabolic acidosis, and to combat it, the body uses the calcium from our bones, and that in turn weakens our bones. Nature Journal has published data showing that the countries with the highest consumption of dairy and animal protein also happen to be the countries with the highest hip fracture incidences. So knowing the risks to our health, I urge you to give your next meal a second thought. Your home. Humanity has high demands on nature, but to what extent do you contribute to that? What impact do you have on the earth? We all know that water is not an expendable resource. Since we are fortunate enough to not be among the 800 million people who do not have access to clean water, we should be seriously considering how we might be wasting this valuable resource. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, for instance, has reported that the total water required for nationwide animal agriculture can range from 34 to 76 trillion gallons of water per year. When we consider our water footprint, it includes the water we drink, the water needed to produce the food that we eat, everything from showers, anything that might require us to consume water. And each food item that we buy has a water footprint as well. Beef, for example, doesn't just require the water that cows drink, but also the water it takes to grow their feed crops. Growing feed crops for livestock alone is responsible for 56% of national water consumption. A quarter pound of beef, which is about one burger, requires 660 gallons of water to produce, which is about 1 month's worth of the average American shower, which is about 8 minutes long. And then a pound of cheese, which is 2 servings of mac and cheese, is about 2 months, a little bit less than 2 months of showers. Environmentalists and government organizations urge us to reduce water waste that we're each responsible for with a focus on household water usage. So some of these calls to action are switching to efficient appliances, fixing leaky faucets, and cutting back on shower time. But these 3 and the minor changes that are recommended to us, they are advertised as extremely influential, but together, if we take all of these recommendations, it would only save up to 47 gallons a day, compared with 660 gallons of water used from just 1 burger. So all of these efforts fall into the domestic water conservation, but domestic use only accounts for 5% of water consumption in the US. 51% of all worldwide human-caused greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to livestock and their byproducts. Animal agriculture produces 150 billion gallons of methane, which has 86 times greater potential of affecting global climate than carbon dioxide. It's also responsible for 65% of the emissions of nitrous oxide, which has 296 times greater global warming potential than carbon dioxide. But we're mostly warned about carbon dioxide emissions that the transportation sector are responsible for, when in reality, a report published by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN asserts that raising cattle is responsible for more emissions than the exhaust of the entire transportation sector. Some people believe that livestock's tremendous contribution to greenhouse gas emissions can be completely eradicated by switching to grass-fed cattle. But the reality is that physically there isn't enough land on Earth to sustain people's growing demands of meat and animal products. Feeding someone on a plant-based diet for just 1 year, for example, requires 1/6 of an acre of land. A vegetarian diet requires 1 acre, and a carnivorous diet requires 6 acres of land. There isn't even close to enough arable land in the United States to provide 6 acres of land for each carnivorous individual in the entire American population, all to produce natural grass-fed beef. The meat and dairy industries also have been directly correlated to an enormous amount of land and rainforest destruction. Millions of acres of rainforest have been cleared for animal production, animal agriculture purposes, and this deforestation has resulted in the extinction of 137 animal, plant, and insect species that go extinct every single day. So the reality is that the earth just can't sustain this kind of lifestyle. Your neighbors. Your impact on the world goes beyond a personal health and ecological footprint. Your impact is also largely measured by the way that you touch the lives of others. So how do you affect the lives of the animals that we share the earth with? Unfortunately, as much as we might want to believe that the meat we buy is cage-free and ethically raised, the demand for meat and animal products is just too high to raise only grass-fed cattle. In these factory farming conditions, animals have almost no space. They're injected with hormones. They live in their own feces. They live next to animals that are sick or maybe even dead. So of course, they will eventually develop diseases. A report by the Food and Drug Administration attributes 80% of the use of antibiotics in the United States to raising livestock and poultry. And when we hear this, it's important to consider that whatever these animals go through and are injected with ends up in our bodies as well. Studies have shown that pigs are smarter than and just as social as dogs. But the pigs in these factory farms live their lives in crates barely large enough to fit their own bodies. They suffer from open wounds that never get treated, and the distress caused by these conditions lead to anxious and bored pigs banging their heads in frustration. Farmed fish also endure the pain and stress of hyperconfinement, and that this hyperconfinement also leads to diseases. These conditions negatively impact the delicate ecosystem that they're part of as well. About 9 billion chickens are raised for meat every year. They're drugged to grow and become so large that their legs can break and organs can't keep up, which makes organ failure and heart attacks very common. Another 305 million are raised for hens. They are crammed in cages so tight that they can't spread their wings. Their beaks are also cut off so that they won't peck at each other in frustration. Finally, when egg production drops, they're sent to the slaughterhouse to be turned into chicken soup or dog food. And on the way to the slaughterhouse, millions of animals die from the stress of the journey. Over 29 million cows are raised for food every year. On dairy farms, calves are taken away from their mothers when they're just 1 day old so that the milk can be harvested for human consumption. Male calves are sent to veal production operations after just the 1 day. The lives of cows used for dairy are a cycle of artificial impregnation, hormone injection, and milking regimens. And it's just an endless cycle, which causes a life of extreme emotional trauma. The average life expectancy of a cow is 20 years, but the ones in factory farming conditions like the ones in this picture usually collapse from exhaustion after just 4 years and are then sold to the meat industry. A.D. Williams said that mankind is not the only animal that laughs, cries, thinks, feels, and loves. The sooner we acknowledge that animals are emotional beings, the sooner we will cease destroying animals and embrace them as our brothers and sisters. Humanity is definitely flawed. Historically, we've seen groups that have regarded themselves as superior to others and justified doing as they pleased to their perceived inferiors. Unfortunately, that's the attitude that humans have towards animals, and it leads to a lot of cruelty. But we have the power to break this pattern. We're not really that different from animals at all, in the way that we experience love and looked at our loved ones and the way we enjoy music like these cows do, But in my experience, after I learned about the cruel treatment that these animals in this industry go through, it just became impossible for me to ignore. And as I became more aware, it forced me to think outside of myself and start regarding animal products as a wasteful luxury that I just couldn't morally justify anymore. Even though it was originally hard to accept the unethical treatment of animals that was going on, it was the biggest motivator for me personally to adopt a plant-based diet and lifestyle. It's a more gentle approach to life with higher respect for others, no matter the species. But why aren't we talking about the severe consequences of this industry? I believe that there are two main reasons. The first is that we're taught early on to be extremely emotionally invested in food. It's a significant aspect of our cultures, and as we teach our cultures to newer generations, it becomes traditional. While a lot of people might say that eating meat is traditional, just because something is traditional doesn't make it morally acceptable. And we've seen examples of this scattered in American history, world history really, and I'm sure we can come up with some examples. But in reality, our natural instinct is to show compassion for animals. If we were to put a 2-year-old in a room with a baby pig and a puppy, that child would not pet only one of them, would not only pet the puppy, they would pet both and interact with both because they can't distinguish between one is food and one is a friend. So societal pressures to conform are actually what teach us to suppress our natural instinct and inclination for compassion. The second reason why I think we don't hear about this very often is that a lot of health and environmental organizations that have a powerful voice do not address these issues enough. And they don't do it because they're financially reliant on companies that sell animal products, which are the very cause of the problems that they're meant to address. If they made this deprecating information known, they would lose their very reliable source of funding. For example, the American Heart Association is backed by Tyson, Purdue, Nestle, and Texas Beef Council. They're all national distributors of animal products. The lack of attention placed on this topic, coupled with People's choice to ignore it and accept and embrace its stigma causes its widespread disregard. It's definitely easy to embrace stigmas because once we agree with the label that others give an unpopular topic, it makes us feel that we understand it, so it's a lot easier to reject it. But like my dad always told me, you'll never learn by doing what's easy. Seek the ideas that make you feel uncomfortable and be open to positive changes. I hope I've inspired you to challenge yourself to live a more compassionate life and make more conscientious choices for your body, your home, and your neighbors. Individually, we each have tremendous power to reduce the harm we inflict on the world. What will you do with this power? I'll leave you with this quote by Robert F. Kennedy. Thank you so much.